Welcome to WDFN.com, another edition of the Friday Faceoff. It's Eric Chase, Matt Shepard from Shep in the Morning. Glad to have you here. You know, this thought dawned on me last week. We asked for your feedback on what we talk about, and usually you come here and you're thinking, well, Shep's got one side, Eric's got another side, and we're bashing heads for 5 minutes every week. And then it kind of dawned on me, it's more PTI-ish, where we don't always disagree, but we offer different opinions, different viewpoints, different ways of looking at the same issue.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an argument every single time, but we can have different spins. That's how you learn from one another.
Plus, he could kick my ass, so let's not take it there. Let's take it with Bountygate. Vilma gets the entire season. He can't participate in anything whatsoever. Anthony Hargrove got the second biggest punishment, 8 games. He now plays or doesn't play for the Packers, and then 2 other players.
Will Smith gets 4 games. He's with the Saints. And then you get Scott Fujita, who's a linebacker with Cleveland. He gets 3 games.
I know there's been some discussion that this was too severe a punishment for Jonathan Vilma. I heard you mention on the air, you know, Mickey Loomis only got half a season. Sean Payton got 16 games.
Yeah.
What I'm not surprised.
Joe Vitt got 6 games, right?
Yes. So he'll be the head coach when he gets back. I got no problem with this. I got a lot of problems with Jonathan Vilma, but let's just specifically address the punishment. I don't have a problem with the severity of it. From what I've read, from the intel, the NFL tells me they've gathered and vetted through a former New York State attorney. I forget the woman's name.
Mary Jo White,
yeah,
who also put John Gotti away.
Yeah, and she's the heavy-handed lawyer now and does white-collar criminal defense. So I trust that she knows her stuff. And while the NFL might be trying to go after someone, I'm going to trust what they're saying. That Jonathan Vilma was part of creating this along with Greg Williams, so I'm okay with that 16 games.
I don't have a problem with as much that as I do with if Mickey Loomis has been warned more than once by the NFL, which is a fact, and he gets half what Jonathan Vilma got, I wonder why they're not at least even there. Loomis allowed it to permeate in his clubhouse, in his locker room, in his organization, knowing full well that the penalty could take place. Vilma, whether or not he knew that the Saints were being investigated is up for debate. He basically went out there and said, here's 10 grand, let's knock out, let's card off Kurt Warner, let's card off, let's knock out Brett Favre. It goes everything against what I think football players in that type of fraternity believe to be up for one another. But if you're going to have 16 games for Jonathan Vilma, and I agree with you, then I want at least the 16 for the general manager who allowed for it to continue.
So in this case, we'll spin it this way to really oversimplify.
How does it affect the Saints? How much will they be hurt by something like this?
Well, I'll come back to it. Let me simplify it by saying this. Jonathan Vilma wasn't overpunished. Mickey Loomis was underpunished.
Fair enough.
How the Saints are affected? I think they have an ability to win 10 football games next year. Heard a guy call your show today say, well, they got Curtis, or you said they got Curtis.
They got Curtis Lofton, who had more tackles than Jonathan Vilma a year ago, and he was one of the most coveted linebackers out there. And the other 2 guys in this whole thing were penalized. Play for other teams. Hargrove with Green Bay, Fujita with Cleveland. Look, folks, 27 players were part of this. 23 got off scot-free. That means 4 guys are being punished. 2 are not with the Saints any longer, and one of them might not have been re-upped with the Saints anyway because Curtis Lofton was brought in. How much are they hurt? They're probably hurt more by the coach being gone than Jonathan Vilma.
I would agree, and don't forget they had David Hawthorne as well.
That's right, who came over from Seattle, who was a really good coveted
agent. If you look at the Saints off-season free agency, obviously they were hindered in the draft by a lack of picks, which they brought on themselves.
Sure.
They traded for Mark Ingram. A lot of people would give the Saints off-season free agency an A+. They did lose Tracy Porter, but Malcolm Jenkins has to step up. Talent-wise on the field, I think they'll be okay. People say Drew Brees can go out there and act like a head coach on the field. I would disagree with that, and I think I know the situation better than anybody that's watching this right now because I'm a Saints fan, I'm a Brees fan. I think Brees acted physically out in the field, and his mind was run by Sean Payton on the sidelines. I think to ask Drew Brees to take on the mental aspect of constructing the offense and running it, as Sean Payton called it, as essentially an offensive coordinator, I think you're going to burden Drew Brees a little bit, and it will impact his play.
I don't think there's any question Drew Brees, if I said to you, I want you to do what Chuck Noll asked Terry Bradshaw to do back in the 70s, and that is call a game by yourself, run it by yourself. Roger Staubach's done it. Peyton Manning's done it. I'm confident that Drew Brees can do the same thing. The difference here is, I think what you're getting to, is that Drew Brees requires some type of blueprint, and that blueprint is formed by watching film of not just the Saints but the opposition, and then creating it, and that's done by Sean Payton. Drew Brees could call his own game based on what Sean Payton's information provides him, but for him to do all that other legwork, I think is almost impossible, and you can't expect.
He can be a great quarterback, and
he is a great quarterback.
Yeah, right, obviously. In the day of, I think he can make the audibles and things like that and adjust. If I'm not mistaken, too, when Sean Payton was hurt last year, how funny does that sound?
Yeah.
And was up in the box for a couple games, I think Drew Brees wobbled a little bit. Now, obviously, he's got more time to prepare for that this year, but people who are just going to throw the blanket statement out there and said, Brees was the offensive coordinator anyway, that's BS.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a lot of work for a very complex offense, but I still think they've got enough talent on that team, and they've upgraded the defense. Hopefully with the right moves. They've kind of faltered in the past trying to fortify that defensive line, but linebackers, they had a kid who didn't even get on the field last year who will probably replace Robert Meacham. I still like the running game. I still think they can win 10 games. And
I do too, and it's in a division that I think is very winnable. Atlanta's improved itself a little bit. Tampa improved itself through the draft for sure, and through some of its free agent moves. I think they still win it. It is interesting, though, how people constantly are making an excuse for Jonathan Vilma in this whole Bounty Gate discussion that he is just doing what coaches tell them to do. There are plenty of ways, I believe, that players can act or react to what coaches are telling them to do. All you have to do is look at what the Lions did a couple of years ago when they didn't think that it was proper for them to be doing the type of, I don't know if it was in-season or off-season workouts. They went to the NFLPA, who filed some type of grievance against the Lions, and they were told to pull back. There are ways that Jonathan Vilma could have easily said to Greg Williams, no, I'm not doing this anymore, not to mention the fact that every single year he's got 100 tackles and has a lot of credibility.
The Lions thing is probably because, they didn't want to do a little extra work. So to me, it's a little different. But with Vilma, I know there's a point out there saying, hey, listen, these guys have to do this or someone else will step up and do their job. I get that if that's like the third linebacker on your team.
That's right. If it's a special teams guy, a fringe guy who's maybe not dressing on Sunday. Jonathan Vilma's backup is Ramon Humber. Who? Exactly.
I don't know who that is.
Right.
If you've got $10,000, and I know this has been ingrained in his mind for a long, long time to seek and destroy, but if you've got $10,000, which Jonathan Vilma does, he's made a lot of money as a very good linebacker for the Jets and for the Saints. If you've got $10,000 to put on the table, and I believe he actually would have paid it out, if you've got that kind of money, you've got the kind of substance to go, sorry, coach, this is wrong.
That's right.
I've got enough money to say I'm going to walk away from this because my moral compass is off the charts with negativity. I'm not doing this.
Maybe it might be just as important. You also have the credibility within that locker room and maybe within the NFL in general to say, look, I don't like what's going on here. I know what that guy goes through on a daily basis because I go through it too, and I'm not going to put a guy's career at risk. He's built up enough credibility to be able to do something like that. He's not Ramon Humber. He can't do that, but Jonathan Vilma could without fear of any repercussion of a guy taking his job.
The story that won't die. Sorry if that's a poor use of language right there in light of Junior Seau, but this story will not go away. We're going to keep discussing this. Hope to see you back here next Friday and listen to each of our shows, 7 to 10, 3 to 6, Detroit's 11:30, WDFN, and WDFN.com, the Friday Faceoff.